Something, I think the one in the middle is something that is colloquially called vibes-based testing. And it's around,
That's me.
it's basically,
That's me.
yes. And it's basically like you talk to your model or whatever and get a response. You're like, oh, this looks good or it doesn't look good. And actually, I think that's great. I think that's the first thing anyone should do. And I think it's the first thing anyone does. I think the problem is more people don't move beyond that. But as a first step, it's great. Because I think the best thing you can do is like actually look at what's happening to your system and get a really good hands-on idea of what's going on and what the behavior is, and do that directly initially. So I think that's like the best, like better than nothing, but also like really good thing to do initially. Like definitely do vibes-based testing. Please, like actually, yeah, look at what your product is doing. I'd say like a bad eval are the ones that
Julia Neagu is CEO and co-founder of Quotient AI, cutting-edge startup dedicated to helping companies and startups build the best AI products possible. She holds a PhD and MA in physics from Harvard and Princeton. And before founding Quotient AI, you were the director of data for GitHub Co-pilot, where you led like the team that was responsible for evaluating LLMs for the Copilot. So thank you so much for hopping on the webinar today, Julia.
Awesome. It's great. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. And thanks so much for the intro.
Awesome. Okay. Did I know your name right? Like, was that correct?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. No, I appreciate the confirmation. That's always a tricky one.
Awesome. Cool. So first question, where did the name Quotient AI come from?
That's a good question. I think it was so about a year ago, Freddie and myself we were thinking about starting Quotient. That then I think we pitched it before we even had a name and like a deck. Like I think we pitched the concept of building an evaluation platform, particularly for folks who want to build products as good and as amazing as GitHub Copilot. I'm not biased at all. But yeah, we started pitching Quotient right, like even before we had anything going in terms of a name, logo. And when we saw that this was something that resonated with a lot of people, we realized that, hey, like we should probably name this thing. And I think it was a Signal chat, a late night co-founder chat with Freddie, where I think I just said, oh, well, we call it Quotient. And where Quotient comes is from these like IQ and EQ, like intelligence quotient, like emotional quotient type of metrics. It comes from, I guess, our hope that eventually the way you evaluate AI will be as comprehensive and as I know impactful as how you evaluate human intelligence, because that's ultimately like the goal of all of this, right? It's like, can we build AI that is as intelligent as humans? And in hopefully, I know, the not so far away future, that will be the case. And then the way you evaluate the quality or like the intelligence of artificial intelligence and these models will be similar to how you evaluate human intelligence. So that is our hope for the industry in general, and our hope for our company is that you will have these like quotients for AI. And how we get there, both from like the underlying technology standpoint, like of actually getting to something that's that good, and how you think about building good evaluations is, I think, the task that we're setting off to solve.
Great. Sounds like why you started this was directly from your experience at GitHub doing evals, right? So can you touch on that a little bit more?
Sure. So GitHub was a really exciting project. So GitHub Copilot was a really exciting product to work at GitHub. It was a lot of fast development, quick iteration, and we worked very closely with like my team worked very closely with like the engineering team and with the product teams, and our goal was basically to know help them know if they were making changes to the models or to prompts or anything under the hood of Copilot, what would lead to better behavior in production. So we had to have tooling and infrastructure to get those metrics. One, you had to define those metrics, and then we had to measure them, and we had to have a way of doing this over and over again every time we were shipping something to users, and also measuring things in production. So I'd say at a high level, everything was very metrics driven. Everything was very focused on how can we ship fast, and then ultimately, inevitably, someone asks how can we ship faster, and the confidence to ship these products and to iterate came from the fact that there was a way to measure the impact of any change that was done to the underlying AI products. So that's kind of what inspired us for Quotient as well, is can we make that for any product? But otherwise, it was GitHub was like an amazing place to work at, and it's career-wise, I know, impacted me tremendously. It's a lot of folks are very focused on building and very focused on developers and very focused on developer experience, and that's top of mind every day. And I think that's something that I don't want to lose track of as we're building Quotient and as we want to enable AI developers as well.
Side question. So you went to school a couple of times to do physics. Why you end up doing like ML stuff?
Physics doesn't pay the bills now is the short answer. But I think it's more like honestly, it was a personal decision in terms of not staying in academia, and it came from the fact that I'm probably too impatient of a person to operate well on academic timelines. And I like doing things fast, and I like trying out new things and working on that diverse set of problems. And going into like machine learning and AI was really interesting because you could apply very similar frameworks to and principles to what you learn in like a physics PhD or a computer science PhD to solving a diverse set of problems. So that was very attractive to me. I could see myself, working in different industries on different problems, and that's ultimately what I end up doing. So I went from building AI models for insurance to building touching basically every part of the product at GitHub, for example, and building like data science and machine learning solutions there, to switching to AI. So I'm very much like, you can apply these core principles to a diverse set of problems, and it was that diversity that attracted me a lot.
That makes a lot of sense. What was your best memory of GitHub Copilot or GitHub in general?
It's definitely something people related. I joined GitHub at an awkward time. Like, it was COVID was still on people's minds, and we were just going back to having the optionality to meeting in person. But it was still, I think, like end of 2021, so it wasn't easy, and the entire team and like all of GitHub is actually like remote first, so everyone was around the US and Canada and some folks around the world. So whenever we were able to meet in person, it was and do these like offsites, it was very special because people hadn't had that type of interaction like in general, but very few people had the opportunity to do so with folks they work with at GitHub. And it was pretty amazing to have the opportunity to meet again with folks from all over the world. Like we had this like offsite in Copenhagen like 2 years ago. 2 years ago? Yes, I think so. Or last year. No, 2 years ago. Time is weird. But it was folks from the US and Canada and India and the UK all coming together, and a combination of like technical talks and I don't know, fun activities. And that was very special.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, I feel the same way about working remotely and getting together with people in person. Definitely, the energy feels a lot different.
Yes.
So feel free to say no to this question, but would you be able to give us a glimpse of like what it was like at GitHub Copilot to do evals? at the size of like an organization that is as big as GitHub, but also move as fast as GitHub Copilot?
Yeah, so it was definitely a very complex endeavor. It involved teams both from like GitHub and Microsoft all working together. So from where I was sitting, just coordinating that technical work across multiple organizations was very interesting, at times quite challenging. And what was interesting on the technical side is we had to wrangle different solutions that were available to us. Some from like internal tools that GitHub had used to develop the first prototypes for Copilot, and that was before I joined the product. And other times there were tools coming from Microsoft. Like for example, observability was very important to us. Like we knew that thinking about evaluation, there are kind of like two big buckets. You test like pre-deployment, and some folks call that offline evaluation. You test post-deployment, and some folks call that online evaluation. And we knew that ultimately, whatever we do offline is to test things sufficiently to give us confidence to run actually an A/B test in production. And from that, actually like making the decisions of, do we want to ship this feature? So everything was kind of like building up to, do we have enough confidence in this improvement to do like a, I don't know, 1% test with our users in production. And for that, we used something called the Microsoft Experimentation Platform, which I'm pretty sure it's an internal Microsoft tool. Like they publish some of their research, and you can check them out. But that was what we used to run really comprehensive A/B testing, and we had the advantage of a very comprehensive and large user base to do so, which is interesting if you're an AI developer now. Yeah, which is a very something that not a lot, probably not a lot of like AI apps can do right now. And that's an interesting problem if you're a developer. If you're thinking about A/B experimentation, especially if you want to ship like incremental improvements, that's impossible, right? Because you will straight up not get the power for like A/B experiments at scale if you don't have a large user base and if your impact of your incremental changes is low. But we had this advantage at GitHub that we could, so that actually like unblocked us, because we were able to, given that we were able to measure these changes, ship them, like measure the impact of our changes with actual users and ship them in production to everyone. So that was something that really helped us build fast, and it came from having, again, the tooling to do so, and and also crisp understanding of what we wanted to measure. That was always the first step. Yeah.
Nice. So what I'm hearing was, again, like clear objectives of what you want to measure, a huge amount of user base. So like all the developers were eating that thing up when it came out. And what's the other thing? Oh, like a platform that is very comprehensive to like do eval, so experimentation. So you call it Microsoft Experimentation Platform, which is, if I Google it, probably won't come up.
And then also having the offline evaluation. So basically being able to test things before we ship them to users, because there was a risk, and because we were so early that we didn't know that much about like the impact of different changes we were making, or we didn't know what would happen when there would be some model updates. Like things were still rather fresh, both for us and for the industry. So we needed to be able to test things pre-production, and having a way to do that easily was also essential. Generally, like the entire idea behind evaluations is get as realistic data as possible and have the entire process be as seamless as possible, because testing is kind of like the necessary evil they have to deal with in order to actually know what you're doing. But people actually want to build, not to test. Test is like you need to test, but the exciting part comes from like, I build something really cool and it works. Yeah.
Cool. If you say that you have to test one more time, I might put in unit tests in my prep like later today.
Yes.
So what you said really reminds me of this conversation that I had actually on a webinar like this with Abby Aron, whom we talked to a couple months ago. And she was writing a book about LLM Ops with O'Reilly. And she mentioned that one of her like controversial takes at the end was that don't treat LLM evals like how you would treat like ML but treat it like DevOps, because the LLM is actually interacting with users directly. So it's almost like a UX kind of like application layer thing to test, as opposed to like experimentation and then bring it to production. So I wonder what your takes are on that.
Oh, interesting. So, well, my hot take is that I'm not convinced that LLM Ops is like as differentiated as other types of ops, like ML Ops. I think if I were building more of an observability tool for LLMs, I would probably call it LLM Ops, but usually the tooling is very similar. Like if you build like an observability solution for LLMs, it's largely, it was going to end up being a very similar thing under the hood with something that you could use for ML, like regular ML ops. And you could see this simply because there are a ton of companies out there that were doing ML ops that are now doing what some would call LLM ops, and they did this quite easily on top of the same platform. So, and we also did this, for example, for Copilot to some extent, because this Microsoft experimentation platform we're talking about, that wasn't built for LMs. Ultimately, like, it's all a function call, right? Like, you get input and output, and you're measuring some telemetry, and you measure some metrics on top of it. I think there's like value in things like tracing. Like, I think that's interesting, especially like tracing for agents. But in terms of like general observability, I'd say you can rely on like existing observability tooling for that. And so I actually think they're quite indistinguishable. I'd say something that's the problem is actually like in this pre-production evaluation, and that's where Quotient is focusing. We're focusing all our efforts. Because actually the statistics show that most developers don't get to production with whatever they want to build, and that's a problem. Like, we still see a lot of these LM-based applications stuck in betas and stuck in the internal testing, and like developers aren't sure when to ship it or if they test it enough, and largely it comes from these like non-deterministic outputs that come from the model and the lack of confidence that developers have in terms of like sufficient coverage with their evaluations. So how you get to that confidence is something that we want to solve. Like, how do you know that you've tested enough and if you've tested well? And again, for LLMs, we will call this process evaluation. But I think the crux of the problem is more in this like pre-deployment stage, because that's also where most people are stuck. And also because once you do ship things to production, the problem is like a previously solved problem by previous observability companies, more or less. There are details, and there may be some like places you can wedge a new type of tooling, but I think largely the problems you see once you put things in front of users are solved, and they're more like on the observability side. And the problem is more like, I see the user is doing something, it's not good. How do I change it? And then you go back to pre-production to like figure out how to fix it. And then that process is broken.
Cool, thank you. So thanks for the sound bites. It sounds like your hot take is lots of companies, lots of developers can't bring their stuff from pre-deployment to production. That's why the bulk of the work for observability should be focused on pre-deployments, which is very similar to like traditional ML observability, ML ops. And that's where Quotient AI comes in. Cool. So how is Quotient, this is kind of like a spicy question. How is Quotient product different from stuff like Langsmith? And coming from what you said earlier, my guess is that Langsmith kind of focuses on like what happens when you're in production. So kind of like users' responses are coming in, now you're tracing them, and you're kind of like trying to figure out like a data set to kind of like improve later. But I'm gonna let you say it.
Yeah, yeah, I think you teed up quite well. Yeah, so tools like Langsmith are focused purely on this like online evaluation case. Again, for now, and they may expand later. But as I mentioned, we think there's like a huge gap with developers getting their products to production, and we want to get them in front of users, and maybe then they can use tools like Langsmith if that's something they want to. But the general crux of the problem is how do you evaluate again before you ship things to production to gain the confidence to even get in front of users, and then how do you do that realistically? So we're very focused on enabling curation of benchmarks that are use case specific, the users can build themselves. And we do this with combining generative tools with human feedback to make things extremely simple, and really cutting that extensive like manual human data curation aspect that folks rely on for building their benchmarks today. And also providing the tooling such that you don't have to, I don't know, write like hundreds of lines of code to set up like an evaluation framework. Like it's the case with a lot of solutions out there today that it's still quite complicated for a developer to set up a framework. Like the platform generally, what they provide to developers is kind of like a place to visualize their artifacts and a place to do like version control and so on. And that's what they take on the platform side. Quotient wants to take away basically everything that the developer doesn't want to build in terms of evaluation, like in terms of interfacing with the inference endpoints, or again, like scheduling these like jobs that can run across like I know entire benchmarks and parallelizing them and making it extremely fast. Like that's all handled under the hood. So with Quotient, you can just like pip install Quotient, you're in a notebook, you have 5 lines of code, you define like what data set you want to use, what task you want to evaluate on, what metrics you want to run, and you just queue the job and that's it. Like you don't need to, everything's just like handled by the platform under the hood. We want to get folks to shipping an like running an evaluation task in 5 lines of code, and making that process extremely easy. Because again, our goal is to get folks to spend a little of their time and mental capacity on testing and get them the feedback very quickly such they can go back to building and iterate and ship. That's our main goal as a tool.
That's great, because if it's more than 5 lines of code, I'm not writing it.
Yes, I mean, people don't want to write tests, right? Like it's so hard to get even like engineers to write unit tests, and the only reason it's happening is one, because we've learned our lessons and like people need to test, but also because usually unit tests are quite lean. So it takes very little to write one, and it takes very little to run one, and it takes very little to know actually what to change. Usually, what to change if the test fails, and we haven't gotten to that point with LLMs yet.
Awesome. How does eval play into fine tuning?
Yeah, so it's fine tuning is one of the levers that you can pull as an AI developer in terms of improving your system. So it's probably like one of the heavier levers to pull. So the simplest thing is you change your prompt. And that's actually the lever that gets pulled most often, and probably leads to like the largest visible improvements in quality when it comes to updates to these LLM-based systems. There are other levers, like you can change the model, or you can change the inference parameters, but the most visible one is the prompt. Or if you're building like a RAG system, making updates to like your retrieval process and improving that. Again, that's a harder one just by comparison. And fine tuning is I think folks move to trying that out after they've tried other things that haven't worked. And because it's more uncertain, it's more complicated. It requires usually more like domain expertise or like expertise in like in the AI space. Like it's easier to change a prompt. You can just edit the text, but how you do fine tuning, how you do it well, and how you curate like a fine tuning data set, like those are a lot of questions you need to answer. So we find developers try that later when they've either tried things that haven't worked or they try things that have worked, but they want to like synthesize it in something that's a bit more straightforward. So they're like, oh, I have now this pretty complex solution. That's what I want, but maybe I can get away with just fine tuning a model that does the same thing, and it's way easier to audit later.
Cool. Is Quotient more for fine tuning or more for like kind of prompt adjustments?
It's for everything. So we want our ideal situation is we want the user to say, here's the configuration of my LLM system. Here's the prompt I'm using. Here's like a benchmark I want to test it on. Or like I'm gonna hook up my like vector database to also set up like a retrieval system. I'm gonna try a couple of different configurations maybe, or I'm gonna make updates to these configurations and see how well I'm doing, either on like a benchmark for like reference-free evaluation, or using some reference-based evaluation, or using some reference-free evaluation or LM as a judge metrics. But the goal is, hey, like you want to measure the behavior as a whole, but then also as you're trying out new things, I may be trying to fine tune endpoint. You want to see what is the ultimate. Am I getting closer to the task that I want the system to perform? Because the goal is to get that improvement you want to see in the metrics, get the improvement you want to see from like the LM as a judge scores. Also, like the visual confirmation, just looking at model outputs that's doing better, and then ship. But it's up to the user to know which lever you're going to pull. And my argument is we want to support everything, every type of lever, because users will ultimately like try all of them, most likely.
Awesome. So what I'm hearing is it's basically a playground for you to come in and kind of hook up your RAG system or a few of your experiments, kind of like referencing what you said earlier about like the Microsoft experimentation platform earlier. And then you just kind of like run the entire experimentation suite, and then you don't have to like write a couple of collabs here and there to kind of test different things separately. You kind of have one place to do all of that. And then you mentioned LLM as a judge gives a score at the end, amongst other things. So you can have a holistic view of like, here are the things I changed, here are the things that actually like the numbers that actually moved, and then you can make a decision at the end. Is that right?
Yeah, I can actually like show a notebook. Would that be okay to screen share?
Yeah, go for it.
Very quickly. Let me see. I think, yeah. So this is like an example notebook that we put together using Quotient, and this is meant to like be very similar to how we imagine a developer would be going about solving a very similar problem. And as I mentioned, the goal for Quotient is to be very lean, but very do a lot under the hood, basically. So the way you use Quotient, it's easy. You pip install Quotient. You'll get an API key from the platform. But that's it. You're able now to use Quotient and run jobs in this notebook. And you have this Quotient client that will handle everything. So here in this workflow, the developer is trying to build a customer support bot, and they want to see if it's good at summarizing previous customer support conversations. And actually, in this example, we use another part of Quotient, which is called the Quotient Evaluation Benchmark Generator, to generate synthetic customer support data sets that are realistic and pass some human review. So this is an example we have here with different conversations. The input text is like a previous conversation, and the expected answer from an LLM is like a summary of that conversation. And this is something we've seen with some of our customers where they want to use AI agents to do like customer support human agent augmentation. So getting them to work a lot faster. And so this is basically the reference benchmark data set that is going to get the LLM stuff is going to get tested on. And this is going to be a pretty straightforward example. So I think so here we're testing a couple of different models with 0-shot and I think 2-shot prompting. And we're testing a summarization task. So this is the data set we're testing things on. And we build these recipes where we say, hey, I want to test, I'm doing like a demo using Mistral for summarization tasks. I have, here's the model that I'm testing. These are endpoints that we support, and we support pretty much every model out there, like everything that's on together, OpenAI endpoints, Anthropic endpoints, so on and so forth. And that's it. So you just say, I uploaded my data set. I'm going to run the summarization task. And all you have to do to run an evaluation task is you say Quotient create job, and take a look at the data sets I decided to run things on and the recipe, which tells them what model gets used, and the job gets scheduled. And it's off into the cloud. And when it's done, you're able to get evaluation results. And again, everything's meant to fit in the existing workflows developers are currently doing. So everything, you can get the results back into a data frame. You don't have to learn, I know, Quotient specific language or anything like that. The goal is abstract away how like the process of running an evaluation job and nitty-gritty details of that, and just get everything that's necessary back to the developers so they can run their own analysis. And we have users who like build like BI dashboards on top of Quotient under the hood. These evaluation jobs are running, so you can do anything you want with this. But yeah, here we start getting evaluation results, and again, it's all going to be in a data frame. And then we have a set of metrics that we run by default. Things like Rouge, BERT score, sentence similarity, so on and so forth, latency. And then here we start doing some analysis. Like we can again, it's all like Python, but you can start looking at top performers. So you can start auditing your responses. You can start looking at low performers. You can really start seeing you can rerun all these cells every time you make a change, and you can build your own analysis on top of it. So as you're changing things, so for example here, let's say I want to try 2-shot prompting. Again, it's quickly set up a new evaluation job, and you get the results back, and it's a similar process where you get these set of metrics, and then you can start looking into comparing, for example, this is the same model but different types of prompting, but you can imagine you can have multiple models and so on. And again, it's all meant to be very, very lean. So similar to how you have these pre-built metrics that we've set up, you're also able to define. I think here we just again choose a different model and rerun the analysis. I think by the end we have this comprehensive evaluation across a different set of metrics of how these models are performing and different prompting strategies are performing. But other things you can do is bring your own endpoints, private endpoints, and test on them, or say, hey, actually none of these metrics work for me. I want something that's a bit more specific. So then you can set up a rubric for a judge LM and run it in a very similar way. And then you'll get the results in the same space, and then you can build the same type of analysis you want on top of it. But you can see how very little time is spent on running the actual eval and setting up the evaluation process. There's basically zero time. And it's all spent on let me actually understand what happened, and let me like iterate on my system rather than spend time building an eval. Yeah.
This is super cool. So my first impressions, this is the first eval framework that I feel like is very code first. The other ones I've tried have been like, here's a really nice interface. It's pretty overkill and a lot of features, and you use whatever you need. But this one, I feel like it can be part of like a larger eval framework that I can build custom. And you mentioned like somebody from your customer base hooks us up to like Power BI, and that works too. And this gives me a sense of like, oh, this was built by like data scientists for data scientists. I feel like this is very data scientist-y.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we did a lot of user research early on, and we were actually like, you have to make a lot of trade-offs when you're an early startup, and you have to choose like, do I want a UI or do I want more like backend functionality? And we asked users like, do you want to run things in RA? Do you want to see things in RUI, or are you like gonna take this and put in whatever you're, I don't know, wherever you're doing your coding and research anyway? And people said, yeah, I'm just gonna take this and put it somewhere else. So we wanted to optimize for, again, not taking things that ultimately like were semi unnecessary on the platform side. Basically, like things like, oh, like let's force you into how we think you should visualize your data, or how we think you should I don't know, run your analysis or anything like that. Like, it's all meant to give the results to users, and they can run those evaluations, because ultimately any UI will be a simplification. Like, if I put any type of data visualization on our platform, I'm going to make some assumptions that will not apply to like probably the majority of the users. And my take is, you also need for these systems to really look at the data yourself and really dig into what's happening yourself. So it's pretty much essential that you need to be very hands-on with both with with your data, with your metrics, and with the system that you're building overall.
Yeah, and like from a developer's perspective, like AI engineering is so new that like there are people who are from the spectrum, on the one end of the spectrum, who's like a full stack web developer, to like somebody who's coming from like an ML and data science background. So I can definitely see myself using this, because like my needs are different from other people, and like the things I want to track is different. So one dashboard for everything is definitely not gonna be super useful for everybody. So I really love this approach. Please don't change.
Appreciate it. Yeah, well, the feedback is we're in the right direction, and we want to see more. Then that's great. But yeah, we'll keep improving and keep adding more functionality. We're actually very excited. We have a couple of updates that are up and coming in the next, 4 to 6 weeks. We'll get them as soon as possible, but we're making it even more developer friendly. Like, we're improving our SDK. We're gonna build. Actually, we are gonna add some UI functionality soon, but it's for a new feature that it basically needs a UI. But for this like large scale experimentation, benchmarking, this is gonna stay the same. It's just gonna be even easier to run an eval and even clearer what's going on.
Yeah, what's been better is UI inside of Colab. I'm just guessing, but
I've seen. Oh well, there are some tools now that do things like that. I am a data visualization nerd, and I try to like not go too deep into the, we really need to make good visualizations, because I can be very nerdy about that for a long time.
For sure. So heavy one, consequences of not having an eval system.
Oh, well, we've kind of seen some of these in the news. I think you've seen some in Canada, right? Like there have been a couple of, I know, some like largely overblown, right, to some extent, stories in the press about some AI bot said something, or like offered a refund and when they shouldn't have, or offer like a $1 car, and those are like meant to generate clicks, right? Like, it's I know it's things like that can happen, and things like that probably happen with human agents too. It's just now that it's in the AI space, there's they can become more viral than other things. But I think there's something there to the extent of you do need, especially as you're putting these solutions out there, these products out there, to know what to expect. Like the worst thing you can have if you're a developer, but also if you're like, I don't know, an engineering or a company leader, is to be surprised by something that happened in production. So the worst case scenario is a bad scenario is you're surprised. The worst case scenario is you're surprised, and it's a really bad surprise with something that these LLMs have done, and it's something that costs you money or becomes viral for some reason overnight, and it costs you your clients, or it's something you don't catch for a while and you're just hemorrhaging money and you don't know why, or it's something that's a bit more hidden, like something's not going quite well. Like, for example, there are some companies who are using LLMs to generate like product description and titles and so on for their like e-commerce websites, and then they see, then if that goes poorly, or if it's not optimized, then it can lead to like decreased sales. So you can lose money on this, you can lose your customers. In some cases, really bad cases, you can get sued. So you really need to protect for that. Again, these are the worst case outcomes. I try to get myself to be more of an optimist and add the optimist perspective, which I think if you're not testing, you're not going to be able to make things, make products that are truly impactful and delight users. And I think it's less so about avoiding the bad things. I think we can avoid the bad things with guardrails, but something we haven't seen yet, and we're starting to see a bit, like we see, I think, again, a bit biased, but we see it with Copilot, and we see it with a couple of other early developer products as well in the AI space, is those truly transformative tools that actually like improve productivity and are great to use, and you actually see, yeah, there's an LM under the hood and it's going great, and I love this interaction and I'm getting value out of it, or it's something that's like a pleasant user experience. And we haven't yet seen those, like, we've seen very few examples, I'll say that, of like industry disruptive AI products, and that's where a lot of the conversation is right now today, is like, why aren't we there more, and how can we create more of those disruptive, transformative, impactful experience? So I think if you don't test, you don't know what's broken, you don't know what could be better, and you don't know how to improve it. So I think it's essential, if you really want to reach that level of progress, and with AI products in particular, we need to have this way to evaluate, because that's how we're going to get to actual improvements and disruptive products.
Yeah, I feel like I really need to hear that, because I gotta put an eval at some point, and this is gonna be, it's gonna push me to do that.
Yeah.
Cool. So can you give me one? So I want you to give me 3 examples. So one example of really bad eval, one example of like average. So like everyone is doing this. It's not ideal, but it's more than nothing. And one example of like really good eval system from somebody that you know, or a customer, or an example you've seen.
So something, I think the one in the middle is something that is colloquially called vibes-based testing. And it's around, it's basically, yes. And it's basically like you talk to your model or whatever, and you get a response, you're like, oh, this looks good, or it doesn't look good. And actually, I think that's great. I think that's the first thing anyone should do, and I think it's the first thing anyone does. I think the problem is more people don't move beyond that. But as a first step, it's great, because I think the best thing you can do is like actually look at what's happening to your system and get a really good hands-on idea of what's going on and what the behavior is, and do that directly initially. So I think that's like the best, like better than nothing, but also like really good thing to do initially. Like definitely do vibes-based testing. Please, like actually, yeah, look at what your product is doing. I'd say like a bad eval are the ones that look informative, but they aren't really. Like for example, if you're building if you're building like I don't know, going back to these like customer support discussions, you're being a customer support bot, it's mostly relevant if I can pass like some I don't know, math benchmark that I got of Hugging Face, or if I'm getting like incremental improvements on it. And it's the case with like a lot of these benchmarks out there that at this point they're like largely in the training set, probably super overfitted on, largely irrelevant for anyone building developer tools or any type of practical applications of these models. But they're tempting because they're everywhere. Like everyone is like quoting them, but probably not enough to inform an actual like I know, like inform how to improve your LM systems and when to ship. The best ones are the ones that are very specific to your use case and your company and your users, and they're very fast and lean and easy to do. So you can like eval well and eval often. And they're also informative in terms of testing a bunch of different testing it in a bunch of different ways. So I won't say something that folks ask me a lot is, oh, like, should I do, I know, should I run like a similarity score or should I set up LM as a judge? Like, which one should I pick? I'm like, don't pick. Usually there's a compromise either way, and different types of metrics or different types of evaluation frameworks test for different things and compromise in different areas. So the best evaluation frameworks I've seen are folks who have a comprehensive set of benchmarks that they've curated internally, different heuristic-based metrics that are fast to audit and easy to run, and also some LM as a judge frameworks that can test for things like correctness or empathy or I don't know, adherence to different rules and so on. And they look at all of those holistically, and that's how they make their decisions.
That's really good. Also, it made me feel a lot better. So just to recap, vibe testing is fine. It's better than nothing. It's actually the average. Most people do this, and I do this too. So there's no shame in that.
Yes,
so
it's actually recommended.
And I found that to be really surprising when you said it. So what's worse than vibe testing was holding on to benchmarks and evals that came from your pre-training or fine-tuning like period, and then try to rely on those metrics to kind of improve your performance of your LLM. So it sounds like it's better than vibes, but it's not, right?
Yeah, because you think it's more informative, but if it's benchmark that's like large and unread what you're gonna do, it's kind of like tricking you into thinking it's relevant when it's not. And then if you're optimizing based on that benchmark, you may not be making getting closer to your ultimate goal of what your user wants out of that product. And it may be overfit anyway. Like it may be part of the training set for the LM, and at that point, it's probably irrelevant.
Cool. And the cream of the crop, the best way to do this is have specific metrics based on your business needs, and then just hone in on that. Make it easy. Make the feedback loop as short as possible. Actually, I heard this from my buddies who founded Outlet, which is like an AI like label company, and they were just talking about like we're testing LMs on a very specific sets of metrics, and I was like, yeah, nerds. But essentially, because they were forced to do that because of the space they're in, which is legal, and I think that that's the way to go. I definitely agree with you with that.
Yeah, so that's it. That's exactly the case.
Cool. 2 more minutes. We're gonna open up the space for our community to ask any questions. Palavit, Matthew, feel free to jump in and say a few words.
Yeah. Thanks, Julia. It's clear you're a leader in the AI evaluation space, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak today. I have just a quick couple questions, I guess. Is there any way that Quotient can like validate common prompt injection? So if I have an app and I'm not an expert and I connect it up, does Quotient help with like prompt injection or ways of kind of escaping the directed path?
That's a good question. I'd say the way I would approach like something like prompt injection is setting up basically a comprehensive evaluation benchmark for like potential attacks, let's say, to your LM system, and doing that in a way that is like tests for a couple of different scenarios that you think, both ones that you think are common, but like also like a lot of corner cases. And you can do this starting from like historical examples from like your own testing or from like in production testing, like if you have individual like examples. And then I would probably use something like this evaluator benchmark that we have to build a more comprehensive data set and to add more variety and also generate potential net new examples of that. And we've seen, and there's also like research on this, that using something, as I mentioned, that's like generative with human in the loop feedback, or actually like asking the model to generate kind of like adversarial examples works quite well. So it's something that I would do for like testing prompt injection pre-production. I'd say in production, again, thinking more about like how you can set up your current observability solutions to just monitor and have some monitor solution there. Something else that we do is we have some users who like have Quotient run on like historical data, for example, just every like in batch, to check if there have been outcomes in the last couple of days or weeks or so on that could be problematic.
Nice. Okay, cool. That's nice that you can kind of help with that.
Yeah.
I don't know if we do have time for another one, or it's okay if we don't.
I can stay on for another one. Yeah.
Okay. Like I come from like a test automation kind of background, and with test automation, I often like to add tests as I add features and kind of try to keep my tests along with my features. So if I'm adding like a feature for billing, I want to add like a billing test suite.
Mm-hmm.
How can I store my Quotient test cases near maybe my prompt templates, so that I can, as I'm adding new features to the to my AI app, I can add new Quotient scenarios?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think because Quotient, again, we're not trying to like wrangle you into our own like setup, for example. You should be able to do that quite easily by saying like, hey, I'm gonna have whatever folder structure I want in my repo, where I have my prompts in this folder, and then my I know, maybe like YAML files with rubrics for my LM as a judge in this other folder. And then you just set up your own script that says read this rubric from this location, and then read this prompt from this other location. And because you have an intelligent folder structure, for example, you're able to do this programmatically for all your different features and all your different types of tests for those features. And then send everything, like basically like queue all these jobs to Quotient to run. So you can just like have a very intelligent like for loop, go through all these files and these rubrics, define these tasks that have like LM as a judge rubrics, ship them to Quotient. We got the results back. And then you can just do any auditing you want on top of those.
That's great. I guess it's a real strength that it's a Python module right now and not like a user interface where I have to click checkboxes and stuff. That's nice.
Yeah, because then you can do everything you want programmatically. And again, you don't have to move to, yet another tool that I have to remember to check. So yeah, we want to be as close to where the developers are building as possible.
That's
but yeah,
awesome.
feel free to try it if we can connect. And if anyone who watches this later, definitely please reach out. My email is julie@quotientai.co, and our website is quotientai.co. So if you want to keep in touch, definitely let me know.
Thanks, Julia.
Of course.
That's all my questions.
Thank you. And thanks so much, Hi and Pallavi, for joining as well, and hi for organizing.
Thank you for your time. And next time you're in Ottawa, you gotta let us know. So
Yes.
we can link up and have you speak at our event.
Okay, sounds great. I'll definitely do that. You'd be the first person I know who's physically in Ottawa, so you'll definitely let you know.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, and take care.
Thank you. Thanks. Be in touch. Bye-bye.